June 17th, 1998, an ad appeared in Toy Shop magazine. Now, what was Toy Shop magazine? Well, at the time, it was kind of the eBay of the 90s. Well, they didn't really hold auctions, but this was a toy magazine. It would have articles and everything, but mostly it was a lot of ads. And you found a lot of cool Star Wars stuff in it because this was the 90s. When people knew, yeah, okay, it might be worth a little bit of money, but they didn't know it was going to be what it turned out to be. So you could find prototypes, carded figures, rare figures, all kinds of stuff. Not just Star Wars, but across the toy board, from die-cast trains to action figures. Well, there was a huge ad placed in July 17th, 1998 by Don Gibson, who owned a toy store in Cincinnati. The ad explained what happened, and to a lot of us, it's a dream come true, and a lot of us scratched our head. Does this sound real? It all started, according to him, on a Friday, June 5th at 4:30 p.m. Phone rang and there was a voice on the other line saying that their grandmother used to work for Kenner and she had a lot of toys, some in package, some loose, some not even painted. And he didn't have a need for this. He'd rather have the cash. He was looking to get rid of it. What did Don do? Well, it seems that he couldn't do anything right then. He told the guy he would love to come and see it about 6:45, but he worried that someone would beat him to him. Maybe this guy's calling around. First come, first serve. It's happened to him before, and he feared it would happen to him again. But he couldn't leave. He had to go pick up his 2-year-old daughter at daycare and take her back home until his wife got home so she could watch the child. He worried about this and stressed himself out as anyone would. And he also worried if maybe he was being conned. What could happen? Might show up at a stranger's house and might get punched in the face. Who knows what could happen? Maybe even something worse. So he called his wife. She wasn't there at the desk. He didn't know what to do. Well, he figured it out. He called his teenage daughter, who was at a friend's house, and told her, hey, you got to get home right away. Don't ask any questions, just come home. Then he went and picked up his daughter from daycare and headed back to his house. When he pulled in the driveway, there was his teenage daughter walking up the driveway, almost home. He handed her the baby and said, watch the kid until mom gets home. The daughter, of course, was confused. What's going on, Dad? She probably thought Grandma was dying or something. She's like, what's going on? Dad just said, I can't talk right now. Wait here till your mom gets home. And he pulled it out of the driveway. He picked up his cell phone and called the guy back. Said, hey, I'm on my way. What could this guy have? You think it was anything really good like he said? He headed down the road, headed to this guy's house, trying his best not to speed. Getting as close to that speed limit, maybe going a little over. Didn't want to get pulled over. That would just slow him down. But he got to the house and he was greeted by probably some kids in their, like college kids, probably in their young 20s. But they did have a young daughter. He introduced himself and they headed into the dining room. He could tell there was some Star Wars stuff on the table. One thing, he didn't want to look too eager, too excited. That was just to make the price go up. But there was something that caught his attention while looking at that table of Star Wars stuff. A rocket-firing Boba Fett. Hold on, I said a rocket-firing Boba Fett. Excuse me. I mean 5 rocket-firing Boba Fett prototype action figures. These were never released to the public, as you know the history of this toy. Probably the most famous unproduced action figure ever. He made it closer to the table. And what did he do? Did he pick up those rocket-firing Boba Fetts? No. Kind of just pushed them out of the way to see what else was on the table. You know, trying to play it cool. He looked at what was on the table. Yes, it was some carded figures, but they were pretty beat up, damaged. He probably could get more for them being loose. But he started to add up in his head. What was the value of all this, not counting those 5 rocket-firing Boba Fett figures? So he came up with a price he thought would make the couple with the small daughter happy. What that price was, he didn't tell us. As for those Boba Fetts, well, he wanted to talk about them separately. So he came up with a price for those. He gave them a fair price, but this was the early days. These things wasn't selling, for as big as they are today. They were selling maybe in the low thousands. You probably could pick up one for around 2, maybe a higher end 6,000. There was, of course, 2 L-shaped Boba Fetts and 3 J-shapes. All 5 were missing the rocket. Anyway, he gave them a price for everything, and they were happy about it, saying they didn't know that all these old toys were worth so much money. He handed them some cash and picked up the toys. Again, we don't know what he paid for this, but we know from his story in Toy Shop Magazine that he took about $5,000 out of the bank before heading up there. So they got the cash, he got all the figures. He said again the other ones wasn't really worth much, probably a little bit more today of course, and headed back home. But on the way home, his beeper went off. Pager. Uh-oh, it was the couple. They were calling him back. It seems that he left some stuff. Such a hurry to get out of there, mostly with those Boba Fett. He left some stuff. He said, I'll get it later. And he headed home with his new figures. And a few days later, he got a call again from the guy saying, hey, I found more of my grandma's stuff from when she worked at Kenner. You want to come over and look at it? Who would say no to something like that? Man, when he got there, this time, the guy had somebody with him. Someone that seemed a little bit more knowledgeable of the toy collecting world. So maybe he wasn't going to get anything really cheap this time. He got back over to the guy's house and he had some stuff, again, not really worth much. He said what he would give for it, and then his friend spoke up and said, no, we want this. So apparently this guy was trying to get more money out from him. Seems that they also wasn't telling him something else. They had another prototype rocket firing Boba Fett and missing the rocket. But seems his friend kind of researched on the internet or something and found out they were going for a lot of money. So he ended up selling that to someone else. He headed back home and he got an angry call a few days later from the guy saying he ripped him off. Saying that, hey, you gave us all this money. You know those figures, those prototype figures were worth a whole lot more money than that. And Don said he did feel bad. But he made an offer and the people accepted it. Whose fault is it? I mean, sure, you want to make a fair offer. You want to be fair. And lowball. And after all, this guy owns a comic book shop. He's not buying it for himself. He is planning to resell them. But it seems the guy wanted his stuff back and wanted the guy to pay a little bit more. And if he didn't do that, he would see him in court. I don't know what kind of legal grounds he would have. I mean, he called this guy to come look at his collection. He made an offer. He accepted it. He took his collection. I don't see what the crime there. You could say maybe it was dirty, underhanded, that he lowballed him. I don't think it was a crime. But of course, Don was nervous. He didn't want to get tied up in some legal action here. But he also didn't like being threatened. So he hung up the phone and contacted some legal advice who told him, hey, you did what you're supposed to do. You went, made an offer, he accepted, you took it. Buyer beware, I guess. And the guy called him a couple more times, complaining, saying, hey, you ripped me off. He told me he didn't have any legal grounds. And finally, the guy just quit calling, and Don was free to do what he wanted to with his figures. Most importantly, his 5 rocket-firing Boba Fett figures. So, what did he do? In that same issue of Toy Shop Magazine, he put a picture of one of the Boba Fetts up. He was ready to sell it. Auction style. He knew that one had sold recently for about $6,500. That's cheap by today's standard. But as you can see here, here's the ad. Up for auction, a J-type painted prototype rocket-firing Fett. No missile included. Auction will start now and end Friday, July 17th at 11 p.m. Eastern, or until 10 minutes pass without a call. Minimum bid is $6,000 and bid will increase by $100, except for after 6 p.m. Friday, July 17th, when they may increase by $50. All bids will be interpreted as an offer to buy. He said it might even take up to 10 days to get it after you want it. So when you see something like this, with this backstory you all heard, oh, my grandma works at Kenner, you're thinking this guy made some kind of prototype. He's trying to rip us off. This story was out there, but a lot of the high-end collectors that really know Star Wars, they knew these was real. I mean, there was questions coming up on the news groups, and mega collector Gus Lopez, he even accepted that, hey, this story is real, and backed it up. But it seems this story was real, and he walked away with 5 of these figures. He ended up selling these figures off through his store or through other auctions. But for about a couple of months, when this appeared in Toy Shop Magazine, people were surprised. It just seems like this rare figure just keeps popping up. Even today, you still see it coming up. How many of these actually got made? The prototypes, that is? Well, I've done a whole video on that. I'll put it in one of these boxes at the end of this video. But I figured it was an interesting story about the early days of someone finding a rocket-firing Boba Fett. And just to tell you that, yeah, sometimes those stories of my grandma worked at Kenner, sometimes they come true and they paid off. I've never been that lucky. I've never been that lucky to get anything like that. I found a blue snaggletooth at a yard sale. That's about as lucky as I ever got. Well, let me know in the comments below. You remember this story? Did you bid on it?
Hey, Junkman channel popping though.
Thank you, sir, for that unsolicited testimony.